this is a spoiler.
You can't
You
listen to
know,
this and not have spoilers.
even now, let's just jump right in. The Beast in the Jungle.
Okay, so this is Henry James, Beast in the Jungle. I'm going to give a brief summary here, and hopefully it'll get us everything we need. The trouble with doing that is that I think this is sort of a story in search of a plot in some ways.
It's not going to find it.
Right. It's tough because so much of what's going on in this story is psychological, and as far as events, there's very little really. But there are some things we can say. There are basically two characters in this story, and two characters only, really. It's John Marcher and Mae Bartram, and we open up with them. And they're in some sort of a social event together, and she's caught his eye, and he's caught hers, and he's sort of trying to remember. It's not clear exactly under what circumstances, but they've met before, and they sort of pace around each other a little bit until they're alone, and then they begin having a conversation, and he thinks he remembers her, although it's sort of unclear exactly in what manner. And then he tells her a story of when he thinks they met before, and she decides it's all wrong and gets the details right for him. And he's starting to feel that he's starting to be a little bit disappointed with the encounter until she reveals to him that he at one point in the past shared his secret with her. And his secret is that he believes that at some point in his life, something extraordinary and extraordinarily horrible is going to happen to him, and it's going to set him apart from pretty much everyone else. And he believes this so strongly and so completely that it's sort of set him apart in his life even before whatever is going to happen. I mean, all throughout his life, he has sort of existed apart, and it's made just behavior or performance out of everything he does, because the only real significance in his life is coming from the expectation of this event. And that is sort of what bonds the two of them, because she's the only one he's ever told, and she's never told anyone else either. And to him, this makes her special in association with his secret. And it's through her companionship that he's able to feel normal in his life and appear normal, because she shares his secret. And they form a relationship going forward through the years, and they have pretty much one topic of conversation between them, and that's this, what he calls the beast in the jungle. And that's this thing that he expects at some point in his life to happen that's going to be horrible. And he doesn't know what it is, and she doesn't know. And they talk about it, they meet, and they talk about it in public, and, they both kind of go on with their lives, but always this is in the background, and this is really the thing that is giving both of their lives meaning. Eventually, they grow a lot older, and she gets sick, and she's sort of not exactly bedridden, but she's stuck in the house, and he has to go and meet with her. But still, when he does, the conversations are revolving around this secret, this beast in the jungle, this impending doom. And she sort of reveals to him eventually that she believes she knows what it's going to be, or he catches hints that she thinks she knows, but she won't tell him. And he finally asks her outright whether she has a more dreadful vision for him than anything he's been able to conceive of so far, and she admits that she has, but he wants to know, whether he'll suffer, and she says no, and he wants to know if he was wrong, was he lying to himself this whole time, and she says no, something is going to happen. And eventually there comes a moment when she waits for him to see what she supposes that this thing is, and he doesn't. And then she tells him that it's happened, and he doesn't know it, but it's over. And this frustrates him even more, and he keeps waiting for her to tell him, but she won't. And she says, it's better that you don't know, and you shouldn't try to find out. And she's getting sicker, and he's all the more frustrated. And eventually she dies, and he goes to sort of travel the world, and he's very disappointed, he's distraught, and he's he misses her, but it's mainly the conversation with her that he misses because he no longer has a companion to share his secret with. And after traveling the world, he comes back and he finds that he really only feels significant, within close proximity to her grave. And so he resolves to stay close to it. And he still doesn't understand why he feels so deeply there, but nowhere else. And one day he passes a man who's been mourning some lost loved one. And he realizes suddenly that when he sees his face, this is what he too has been doing. And he realizes that he and Mae Bartram actually loved each other, and that this was the catastrophe that he's been waiting for the whole time. This was the beast in the jungle. And she knew that this love between them was the thing that could have avoided this catastrophe if he had only recognized it, but he didn't. So now, realizing this, he can't stand it, and he throws himself on the grave, and that's the end of the story.
Bravo.
Well done, Daniel. Well done.
Hopefully I covered all the bases.
Except for the part where you're the reader and you want to strangle him the whole time.
Right.
It's like, God, how thick can you be?
Well, I was thick with him the whole time. Like, and right up until the end, I was like, "What's going on? What's happening? All right, okay. So, is there like is it going to turn magical or something? Like, what's the thing? What is it? What is the thing? What's the secret? Just tell him. Why don't you just tell him?"
You have to give me the phone numbers of every woman you associate with, so I can call and apologize.
I am going to get that right to you, Laura, and I will help you. I will fund you.
That was Mary, actually. You can give it to me too, because I want to talk to every woman you've been with too.
I need a committee, basically.
For Mary and I, this story was a little spoiled because we listened to this course called Literary Modernism, and this professor, Jeffrey Pearl, talks about it, and that was, I think, where Mary's origin for the suggestion came from, right?
Yeah.
So we knew the beginning, we knew from the beginning how it was going to end, and I am actually very curious to hear the rest of you guys' thoughts on this, because I wondered how this story would read for somebody who didn't know that.
Yeah, I read it all in one go.
Oh, you mean you knew about it from this first, before you read it?
Yeah, we knew what the ending was going to be.
See, I read it first time without listening to that course, and I didn't get as much the first time as I did the second time. I thought it was one of those like M. Night Shyamalan moments where it's like, oh, it's all about love, it was right in front of you,
It's love. I don't know if I hadn't heard that, if I wouldn't still think that he was incredibly thick. I mean, maybe it's just, part of being a woman, right? And I don't know. I shouldn't say that it's part of being a woman. Why anyone would devote their life to your quest? There has to be something in it for them. And if they're not, no one's going to put up with your unbelievable self-involvement, make themselves involved in it if they actually don't have some sort of intense emotion for you, let's call it.
Well, and that's his worry the whole time. He's worried that she's not getting anything out of it.
Is he?
Absolutely.
Oh, really? Where do you get that?
I didn't get that at all.
Really? No. I mean, there's explicit passages where he talks to her and says, I'm worried that you being in this with me I'm the only one getting anything out of this because you're always there to support me.
Wait, where is that? Where's that?
Oh, okay, I'll find it.
Can you find that?
Yeah.
Okay, let me know.
We want proof.
I mean, no, genuinely.
I agree with Nathan. I mean, you don't know how genuine he is, but he talks about how he's tried to be unselfish, and that he does confront her explicitly about what she's getting out of this. And I think he hears what he wants to hear, though, as a character.
Well, I think, though, that there's, I think we have enough in the story, too, to question his motives in making some of those statements and asking some of those questions. Because I think that he makes apparent a few times that it's a sort of routine that he goes through in order to assuage his own guilt, and it gets complicated because the question of exactly what the nature of their relationship is extremely psychologically complicated, right? Because the old saying, I don't know where it comes from, about Henry James, right, is that he was the novelist who wrote like a psychologist, and then William James was the psychologist who wrote like a novelist.
Yeah.
Here it is. This is Kindle. This is him talking to May. Well, you're really so in with me, as a sort of result of my being so in with yourself. I mean, of my having such an immense regard for you, being so tremendously mindful of all you've done for me. I sometimes ask myself if it's quite fair. Fair, I mean, to have so involved and, since one may say it, interested you. I almost feel as if you hadn't really had time to do anything else. And then she says, anything else but be interested? What else does one ever want to be? If I've been watching with you, as we long ago agreed I was to do, watching's always in itself an absorption. Oh, certainly, he says, if you hadn't had your curiosity, only doesn't it sometimes occur to you? Doesn't it sometimes come to you as time goes on that your curiosity isn't being particularly repaid?
Particularly what?
Repaid.
So yeah, he has one moment where he realizes that they've been focused on him the whole time.
There's another line too, page 10. There was that in his situation, no doubt, that disposed him too much to see her as a mere confidant, taking all her light for him from the fact only, of her interest in his predicament. From her mercy, sympathy, seriousness, her consent not to regard him as the funniest of the funny. Aware, in fine, that her price for him was just in her giving him this constant sense of his being admirably spared. He was careful to remember that she had also a life of her own, with things that might happen to her, things that in friendship one should likewise take account.
Didn't you get the feeling that he didn't take account of?
Yeah, I think that's why he was just telling himself what he wanted to hear. You know, he thought of himself as he refers to himself as a very unselfish person that, you know.
Yeah, I love that part.
And I mean, I have a line underlined here, like she's on her deathbed, and I just have a line underlined, and it says prick and exclamation points.
I did the same thing, but I wrote, what a dick. Same body part.
So she's dying, and he says, what do you regard as the very worst at this time of day can happen to me?
What about me?
And really, when he feels sorry for her dying, it's because she won't get to experience the singularity he's looking for.
Yeah. But it's interesting because there is this obvious devotion on both their parts. And I tried to figure out throughout if the devotion from him was ever beyond, even at the end when he throws himself on the grave, if it was ever beyond someone to listen to him, someone to be part of his, be complicit in his life. I was puzzled even at the end. I mean, it's a huge thing, right? He finally realizes, love is the beast in the jungle. And I actually did love her, but I was so self-involved that I didn't see it.
Well, yeah, and he also didn't want to involve her. He thought he was taking on this. He was happy that she saw it as heroic. He was always ashamed, that he would be, found out for the secret. I mean, the first time that she says, do you remember that you told me that you were destined for this? And he's like, no, I mean, and it like flushes him because he never had told anybody that. And at some point, at some magical moment, they had this relief in their confidence, and he felt comfortable to say it, and he forgot even, he buried it, probably it was so. And then, he's always worried that he's looking the fool in front of her. And that's why, he harangues her so much. He's like, I don't get it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're waiting for something to happen. And I'm just like trying to make it happen. And I'm worried that you don't see it happening and then that you're not getting anything out of this. And so he drives himself crazy trying to find this other thing. And then only at the last moment does he realize it's, I've been in front of him the whole time. And that's what's like really, the horror story at the end of this. Just overwhelmed with an entire lifetime of longing and the sympathy, like the way that this narration brings out the virtual interactions between peoples and the started conversations and the guessed at thoughts and it's beautiful.
Going with what you just said, Nathan, let me read this here. This is Kindle at 35%, location 324. What I see as I make it out is that you've achieved something almost unprecedented in the way of getting used to danger. Living with it so long and so closely, you've lost your sense of it. You know it's there, but you're indifferent, and you cease even, as of old, to have to whistle in the dark. Considering what the danger is, May Bartram wound up, I'm bound to say I don't think your attitude could well be surpassed. John Marcher faintly smiled. It's heroic? Certainly, call it that, she said. It was what he would have liked indeed to call it. I am then a man of courage? That's what you were to show me. He still, however, wondered. But doesn't the man of courage know what he's afraid of? Or not afraid of? I don't know that you see. I don't focus it. I can't name it. I only know I'm exposed. Yes, but exposed, how shall I say, so directly, so intimately. That's surely enough. Enough to make you feel then as what we may call the end and the upshot of our watch, that I'm not afraid? You're not afraid, but it isn't, she said, the end of our watch. This isn't the end of yours. You've everything still to see. I mean, this guy is the biggest freaking narcissist in the world. And I see as she's trying to take care of him all through her life. On her freaking deathbed, she's trying to take care of this guy. I remember thinking to myself, what happened in his childhood? I mean, what did his mother do to him? And I read up, in secondary sources about this book about Henry James, and a lot of people were saying how this book, this story, considered probably one of his best short stories, if not his best, is really about loneliness. And if you think about it, it is, obviously. I mean, these people were together every day. They got together every day for years, or every other day for years. The majority of their lives, if not their entire lives, and they were still very alone. And I was thinking, okay, what is it about Henry James that found him writing this way? And I read about some things about him, and one of the things I heard was, one, he never had sex, never had an intimate relationship. And I don't know, but that is one thing. It's like he lived his life alone. So the thing that I kept coming across when I was looking into secondary sources and stuff was that everybody felt, and I did too after reading this, is that this is a story about very intense loneliness.
This character, John Marcher, felt that he had something in store for him that was terrible. But I think it was looser than that, right? I mean, the way he defines it is, May Bartram asks, it's something you're merely to suffer? And he responds, well, say to wait for, to have to meet, to face, to see suddenly break out in my life, possibly destroying all further consciousness, possibly annihilating me, possibly, on the other hand, only altering everything, striking at the root of all my world and leaving me to the consequences, however they shape themselves. I'm trying to figure out exactly what he's, worried about or expecting, and obviously the story is him trying to define this, and the only hint I thought of is that, like, he's clearly a very intelligent man, and he sort of stands apart from the rest of society. At one point he says that they realize the majority of people are unintelligent. So is it just the standing apart from, the common forms of life that society has, that he feels himself apart from that, which leads into this loneliness thing?
Or is it having so much fear about love, about exposing yourself to another human being, that you set yourself apart, and that love will be the beast?
Right. In order to love, you become very exposed, like he
turtle on your back.
Here. And and extremely vulnerable. Extremely.
I think he doesn't want to be conventional. He doesn't want to be a part of normal society. And I think that part of this setting apart is a product of his own desires. And in some ways, this beast in the jungle is what he's counting on to make him special, to make him different than everyone else. And I think if you look at the very first couple of pages when he's meeting May Bartram, the way he talks about her and the way he talks about her before they've actually had their conversation, and when he's trying to figure out whether he knows her, whether he should talk to her, what exactly their prior relationship has been, if they've had one, sort of a thread in that is this matter of how conventional she is and what her role in this situation is. And it's only when she actually, confides in him, that he has confided in her, his speciality, that she becomes special. It's like a reflection. She's this sort of screen, I think, for his own significance. And through that projection and reflection back to him, he's able to sort of believe in his significance. But when he's talking about her in the beginning, he's saying that he's talking about, himself and her as opposed to, these common people who are walking around Weather End looking at the paintings and the books and, all of the fancy things about the house and how conventional they are. And
like dogs sniffing cupboards at one point.
That was one of my favorite lines.
There were aspects of the occasion that gave it for Marcher so much the air of the look round, previous to a sale highly advertised, that excites or quenches as may be the desire of acquisition. So yeah, these people are all sniffing around the cupboards and everything like that. But then like later, there's more talk of this sort of acquisitive mode and how conventional that is and how it's deliberately what he wants to set himself apart from. Because one of the chapters, I think, ends with him specifically saying that, like, because we were talking about what he's actually afraid of. He does express fear, but never of the beast in the jungle. He's always afraid when he's really actually afraid that he'll miss it.
Right.
That's what I think he really fears.
Mm-hmm.
And he says at one point that part of that is he's afraid it'll have been sold. And I think that is this sort of conventional mode, the buying and selling of poetry is, and meaning and literature, art, things like that are significant as commodities, and the buying and selling, the sniffing of cupboards. And he's afraid that this tale that he's spun for himself with the beast in the jungle is just, more of that, and that all this time he's been fooling himself.
Doesn't it, in the beginning when he talks about May, there is him talking about how she, doesn't have great worldly circumstances. I got the feeling that that's what held him back at first, and that then they just got so used to each other, but that the way that he made it okay for himself to impose on her was because she didn't have, if she were a woman of circumstance, then, it would have been impossible. But he could take up her time in his search because she, was of a lesser social class than him, but also of, than maybe women that he might consider for marriage or something like that.
There's something really weird going on when they first meet because, for starters, if this is the significant thing about him, if this is like the thing that's going to like set him apart, how could he ever have forgotten mentioning it to one
I can't
person?
figure that out.
It's absurd.
Well, maybe that just shows you how insignificant he felt she was when he first met her. Well, who cares? I'll just tell that, things you tell a taxi driver.
But he's convinced that she's the only one he's told, right? Who knows if that's true or not?
He knows that he's never spoken it. He's afraid to have spoken it. He dared not admit that it was a possibility. And so to her, that's what at the beginning he's so ashamed for, is because he's afraid of this burden or an intensity or an anxiety, that there's something not necessarily lurking that could slay him, but also to be slain. It may be an opportunity, I think a lot like the moviegoer, a moment of action, something like to be taken. And just again, I've also been thinking about the moviegoer and his love at the end, who just attaches herself to him as a form of existence. It's not the only way, it's not the perfect way, but she wants to live through him and for him and remember her and that kind of thing.
There's some strange language, and it's hard to tell because Henry James's language is just so strange to begin with, and so ambiguous and difficult.
Yeah. Can I just say that kind of drove me mad? Not in a bad way. It was just like the language really got me. I found myself rereading passages. I was like, wait a minute, what happened there?
I love it. I love that everything's backward.
It drove me crazy.
And all the sentences. I don't know. I thought that it's kind of like you're going on a little canoe trip or something with him. Like getting from one thought to the next is a little journey every time.
Major journey.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. I wonder if I would have thought differently of it if I hadn't heard that lecture first.
Well, what did he really say in the lecture, though? Just out of curiosity.
It would be way too hard for me to... Daniel, maybe you can give it a try.
One of the things that I thought was mainly interesting about what he was saying was that he was using this story as an example of the way James explodes this dichotomy of symbolist and realist and refuses to compromise between, and this is something I wanted to talk about because I think it's interesting. He refuses to compromise between a symbolist mode and a realist mode in this novel or in this novella. And I think that's interesting because part of the thing you're trying to figure out through the whole thing, right, is like, what does this beast in the jungle represent? Does it represent anything? Is it just faking it? Is he making it up? Is he making it happen? Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? Is it free? Is he determined? And also, is this is the ending of the story? has his revelation and throws himself on the tomb. Is this a symbolic act, or is it actually, is this a realist act? Is this, him meeting his fate? So I found that part of it sort of interesting. And his interpretation was that, this is James refusing to compromise between these two parts of life, because they are both parts of life and they exist in our lives together. We don't, it's not that one of them is right and one of them is wrong. It's that, it's all a part of the whole. And, if you want to write a novel that really captures what life is like, then you have to have both modes.
I was just going to add, one of the interesting things I remember from the lecture is he was mentioning in realist fiction, one of the characters will work under a theory of life. And through the course of the novel, that theory will either be confirmed or disaffirmed, and then another theory will pop up. But in James's work, for instance, he doesn't really work on that basis. There's this theory of life that this character is working under, this beast in the jungle he's waiting for. And at the end, when we find out what it's all about, it doesn't really confirm or disconfirm his theory. We're left not knowing whether a marriage to Mae Bartram was the way to go, or if the way he lived his life was the way to go. We're none the wiser.
It made me think about, I don't know if you guys ever listened to Terence McKenna, psychedelic philosopher. He, often talked about how, doing psychedelics is somewhat akin to sexuality, in that you can spend your whole life and never have sex, never have sexual experiences with other people. And this made me wonder about that, is this some sort of just fear of sexuality, fear of intimacy? And you really can spend your entire life and live on Earth for whatever, 50, 60, 80 years, and never experience what it means to fully experience your own body. And I thought about that a lot with this. This is a lot of fear that this guy has, to never move forward, because really you'd have to be way thicker than this guy is to not have realized that here was an opportunity for love, for intimacy, even if just for sex.
Do you think, if the book was written in such a way that they got married and he realized that was the beast in the jungle, would that have worked?
Well, for this character?
Yeah.
I think it would have violated what you were just talking about, right? Because then he would have decided on an idea.
I think that the thing is that this character is that conundrum in life. Character itself would be a completely different character if he could have been married, saved from his beast.
Well, I was wondering too, to be a little more generous to him, because I do agree that he's a super huge narcissist, and there's a lot of that going on. But I think also there's a universal sort of aspect to this. At least I assume. Maybe it's not universal. Maybe it's just me.
It's just you and Marcher.
Well, maybe so. But isn't there a sort of, at least at times in your life, there's a sort of truth to this idea that you thought you were special. You thought you were one amongst many, who deserve to be singled out. Or
when you're three.
You think it... Oh, well, I may be way behind the curve.
A little bit.
I actually think that it's true still, not about myself, but about I think that everyone is magnificent. I think I'm I'm fucking airy-fairy in that way. I think if you're a human being sucking air, then you are magnificent, period.
Well, there's something, too, about seeing that reflected in someone else that sort of confirms it for you. And I think maybe, at least in some relationships, that's a part of it where, that person allows you to sort of buy your story, that you're special and that you have, they see something in you, and you maybe hoped that there was something to you, but you never really knew until somebody else saw it too. And this guy's just sort of run off the rails with that.
Except for this thing. And that's why this story is in many ways so brilliant and is very seriously about loneliness, because that other person dies, and that death as a metaphor. That other person leaves. The door shuts. Seeing that specialness in you, only because it's reflected in someone else or by someone else, is really a state of severe loneliness. Because if you cannot create that and have that in and of yourself, then, as I say, you're completely and totally alone.
Yeah, and what does it mean to be kind of like half alone? to take a step and then not follow through. Like, they spend all of their time together like an old married couple, but never take that step. And so, you've got this, the other part of this for me is, say what you will about May, but she was just as nuts as he was to put up with it, that whatever codependent crap you want to, language you want to put on it. I don't know what kind of fulfillment. I mean, it's wonderful. I have a million friends. I love humans, but there's only so much that, there's only so much of a relationship you can have in that kind of friendship that isn't just some sort of, maybe at some point it just turns into some kind of sibling thing and then it's impossible.
She was protecting him from information she had, right? I think it's actually a really sad story on her part because I had this line underlined somewhere, but I think when she knew pretty early on what was going on or how she wanted it to end, which was, love. I think the first time she confronts him about the whole beast in the jungle is she asks him if it's love, and he says, no, I've done that before. It should be something more. But trying to find this line. Sorry, someone else talk. I want to find this line.
Well, I just wanted to say, too, that I remembered that, a major theme of what Jeffrey Pearl is talking about in that course and that he's trying to exemplify with this story is sort of the theme that we talked about when we were talking about Ulysses, too. It's that the conventional really is, the magnificent. And that, that was, the big, huge takeaway from Ulysses, I think, for me, was that, what he's trying to do is he's trying to take a day in the life of an average guy, and it's an average day, and, he's trying to make that the Odyssey. He's trying to make that significant on par with, the greatest epic in the Western tradition. And if we can imbue our daily lives and our daily interactions and all the little events, entailed in that, with the sense of meaning that, these great adventures have, then that is the way to sort of make a work of art of your own life, or to really, believe in yourself and believe in other people. And so that was sort of what this novel was about for him. And that was kind of what Marcher failed to see. He failed to see that anything conventional could be significant, and it was always what he was fleeing from.
I just think that the stamp of the common doom, that's what he really dreaded. And it might be a vanity, but it also seems like a possibility. He's in constant doubt about it. Maybe there is another thing to do. Maybe there is something that, he's supposed to be destined for, but maybe not at all. And maybe it's all in vain. And that's I think maybe vanity and egoism are a part of the beast, or a part of the jungle of his mind or his life.
And also the pressure of, your impending death puts a lot of pressure on you. This or this, maybe that. There ought to be something great, because I am going to die. I better do something significant.
It is interesting that, the whole novel is about relationships, and I think it briefly mentions that he's a government worker of some sort, but in this meaning and this intention that he's looking for through life or waiting for, never once does he mention, or does the idea come up that it could be through work,
Yeah.
I found that line. I just, on page 14, she says, it's when he's trying to figure out if she's getting anything out of this. And she says, the matter with me is simply that I'm more sure than ever my curiosity, as you call it, will be but too well repaid. So I think she starts out thinking he'll realize it. And gradually, as, the story unfolds, she loses hope and she goes to her grave, holding back. But really, maybe when you say she's as crazy as he is, maybe off the bat, she should have said, look, you're just a dude. Get over it. Let's...
I actually have a question about that idea of her being as crazy as he is. What about this is on the Kindle 59% in. It says, well, you don't say, question mark. She had touched in her passage a bell near the chimney and had sunk back strangely pale. I'm afraid I'm too ill, she said. Too ill to tell me, he said. It sprang up sharp to him, and almost to his lips, the fear she might die without giving him light. Ah! I mean, I hated him so much when I read that. I'm telling you. She's fucking dying. And he's like, fuck, she's gonna die before she told me.
Where'd you leave the will? Quick.
What drawer is it in?
Yeah. Did you sign it?
I mean, Jesus Christ. Really, what does that say? What is this telling us that James is saying? Or even, I'm sorry, what was the professor's name of that lecture? Yeah, I mean, what is he saying? I mean, this just is, to me, this is abhorrent.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought that the whole story was working, that this guy was going to be like, maybe turn out to be a killer or something, or he was like a latent, savant that just, and like she was tapped into some kind of, thing. Like I had no idea. I really did not see the love coming.
That's what I thought too.
I did not see the love coming.
And the thing is that she threw herself so unconditionally in with his lot that by extension they were together. Her death was actually the first time he considered that he could be left, or that he could even have a partnership in this something, and so I've got sympathy the other way, like I think the thing is also, so does he. That's what kills him, is his sympathy. Like he realizes, and at the last moment it's like, oh my God, no, oh God. And then it overwhelms him like very quickly. And then he said, and then there's this other little bit, and she's like, oh no, she warned me. And then he starts to like moan through his like just throat, like, oh, I shouldn't have figured this out. I wasn't meant to know it. Like I wasn't meant to know that it was like going to be unrequited or whatever. And he literally throws himself down on, where she's laying.
Yeah, maybe I can read that last little part, because I think it's the most powerful part of the story.
Well, I also read somewhere in another one of those secondary sources that last paragraph of this novella is considered really one of the best ever written of James's work.
Yeah, I would concur with that, because I mean, where I did feel a little frustration with some of his syntax before, I really did see some genius in this.
I agree.
But here, I'll read a little bit of this last bit here. It says, "The beast had lurked indeed, and the beast at its hour had sprung. It had sprung in the twilight of the cold April when, pale, ill, wasted, but all beautiful, and perhaps even then recoverable, she had risen from her chair to stand before him and let him imaginably guess. It had sprung as he didn't guess. It had sprung as she hopelessly turned from him, and by the mark, by the time he left her, had fallen, and the mark, by the time he left her, had fallen where it was to fall. He had justified his fear and achieved his fate. He had failed with the last exactitude of all he was to fail of, and a moan now rose to his lips as he remembered she had prayed he mightn't know. This horror of waking, this was knowledge under the breath of which the very tears in his eyes seemed to freeze. Through them, nonetheless, he tried to fix it and hold it. He kept it there before him so he might feel the pain. That, at least, belated and bitter, had something of the taste of life. But the bitterness suddenly sickened him, and it was as if, horribly, he saw the truth, in the cruelty of his image, what had been appointed and done. He saw the jungle of his life, and saw the lurking beast. Then, while he looked, perceived it, as by a stir of air, rise, huge and hideous, for the leap that was to settle him. His eyes darkened. It was close, and instinctively turning, in his hallucination, to avoid it, he flung himself face down on the tomb. And that's the end. So part of, I think, is really interesting is that all this time he's been distanced, right? He's kept this compartmentalization of, behavior and performance and going through the motions of life on the one hand, and then, what's really going on, which is, himself and his story vis-a-vis the beast in the jungle. And at that last minute, the two things merge, where, he has that minute where he's going to try, even this, he's going to try it the old way. And he's going to try and use the story that he's been telling himself to get that glimpse of life. But all of a sudden, this sort of story and the conventional life, the two worlds sort of collide into one. And he's no longer in control of his own narrative. He's at the mercy of his feelings. And maybe this is kind of what Mary was talking about, where that moment finally happens where you do take that next step. Right? And that happens for him to be a horrible moment when it's far too late, but he finally does feel that love.
There's a little bit, it's so sad. There's a little bit before, this is on 96, and just before the bit that you read it. So he saw it, the pale horror, the pieces fitted and fitted. The escape would have been to love her. Then he would have lived.
He's waiting, this beast in the jungle in a way, he's waiting for life to happen, and he doesn't realize that life just does happen, and it's messy, and when the first thing he says about this beast is that it's gonna alter everything, striking at the root of all my world and leading me to the consequences. Well, that's a part of just growing up and living life, and I'm sympathetic to that, because I'm super risk averse myself, and I get just, depressed about the things in life that alter and change your world. I haven't gotten married yet, but I'm already depressed at the prospect of getting divorced one day.
I'll just give you this hint. It sucks at the time, but you do get over it. Yeah. It's horrific, but you get over it.
And not just, I don't have a house, and I'm already worried about going bankrupt, and I have a...
The common doom.
It's just life, it's just life.
Yeah.
So, you're saying that in this story, he missed life. He was living it, but it's went right by him.
He was waiting for this ground-altering thing, but that's just a part of, meeting people, relationships, all, that's just how it works.
Well, doesn't that evoke that Zen idea of living in the moment? And therefore being aware, like Cesare, live where you are right now. Don't worry about the inevitable bankruptcy.
And don't worry why Laura actually used the word inevitable.
Right.
I think it's also at the idea about, I don't know, I guess that there's some theories that the most work that you do in your life is filtering out the things that you don't want to see, the things that you ignore because they'll be too intense but I find that as I get older, I am so much more delighted with nature than I ever thought I would have been. Like the parrots that I see in the trees now, or just looking down, looking out at the ocean today, and it's just a little bit different than it normally is, and it thrills me. And I think about, how much of my youth I spent filtering that stuff out so I could take in things that, meant more to me then. So, I think that, he had to work his filter pretty hard to not see that she was in love with him. And I think that that's a big part of life too. It's like every once in a while taking a step back and saying, I'm sorry, what am I filtering out here? What am I refusing to see that's right in front of my face?
Right. It also makes me think, not only was he filtering a lot out to not see that she was in love with him, but he missed so much.
Right. But by his own willful ignorance.
Yeah, at the moment that he was living. And that's something actually that makes me think of this idea, which actually I learned from my daughter, which is that every day she writes down something she's grateful for in her life now, not in her life tomorrow or a few years from now when the bankruptcy occurs. You know what I'm saying? It's being grateful for something that's right. So he didn't do that. He didn't stop and write down, "I'm grateful for May."
Someone who will listen to me blather.
Yeah, I'm grateful for this woman who listens to my shit all day long.
Who involves herself.
A man of feeling didn't cause himself to be accompanied by a lady on a tiger hunt.
I've marked that one too. I thought that was very interesting, and I thought that was, that saved him a little bit in my mind, because you've got what's going on at the time, and you couldn't expect someone. I mean, there's also the hint of Madonna whore in there, of like someone who's good enough to marry, or someone who you would, who would be that in that exalted a spot, would not also be able to be in the spot where she would listen to your dirty secrets.
Yeah, he makes a distinction when he first meets her that she's different from the kind of girl that he might marry.
Right, lesser circumstances, right?
Well, and also he's saying that when she tells him that he once confided something in her, he says, if it was another woman, he might be afraid that he had made some vulgar offer to her or something, and that's what he'd forgotten. But he says with her, he's not worried that it might be that, because there's something special about her. He's trying to figure out what it is. And then, of course, it ends up being a reflection of him.
Yeah.
In the line, I think I missed that the first go round, but he says, it wasn't that she looked as if you could have given her shillings. It was impossible to look less so. So is he saying that, she's not a prostitute?
Right.
Yeah, that's what's so weird about that first part where they meet. She comes off almost kind of ghostly. And the things that he says about her character are really weird, because they're all almost sort of phrased as questions. He's maybe even imagining them, or he's putting them together himself. It's not clear that any of them are actually true. It's really strange. I'm trying to find that part.
Well, I guess we didn't talk about that, but a part of their meeting, they were looking for, a common thread or some more exciting backstory to why they met.
I love that part.
He's saying he would have liked to invent something to get her to make believe with him that some passage of a romantic or critical kind had originally occurred. He goes on about, wishing that he had a fever and she nursed him back to health, or she got robbed and he found the guy.
Yeah, right. Saved her from a capsized canoe.
Yeah. There's this at 6%. When she finally drifted toward him, distinctly handsome, though ever so much older than when he had seen her before, it might have been as an effect of her guessing that he had, within the couple of hours, devoted more imagination to her than to all the others put together, and had thereby penetrated to a kind of truth that the others were too stupid for. By the time their friends had passed, the charm of it was that even before they had spoken, they had practically arranged with each other to stay behind for a talk. The charm, happily, was in other things too, partly in their being scarce a spot at weather end without something to stay behind for. So it was serendipitous as well that they had an excuse to linger and could stay in this moment that was so hard to verbalize, and she was the one that did it first, and he almost just walked away out of the embarrassment of the situation. And he talks about how the past had just become I think this is the place, a barren landscape. It was just conjecture, if there was anything between them after all, or it was all in his imagination. And she ratifies his internal belief, and by telling him that there was a connection. And that's what allows them to connect from this point forward. They're together until the end.
Yeah, she's the greatest prop in his story that he's telling himself about himself.
Although I would challenge any of you to say with honesty that you've never lingered behind somewhere because you caught someone's eye.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, really.
Is anyone refuting that? Oh, I mean.
No, I don't think so.
But I thought that it was charming in its normalcy. They almost, for starters, they almost had a normal romance. They lingered behind, knowing that they were interested in each other, and then couldn't quite get it off past there.
Yeah, and there was a kind of magic at work because they both wanted to do that. They kind of set themselves up for this moment. And it just happened to be a place in which this moment could, this isn't magical, but it's like human chemistry, like sublimely, without either of them consciously setting out to do it. They had almost arranged it, but just by their desire. And it's what brought them face to face.
See, I thought when I first read this, at the beginning, I thought, all right, this is the beginning of this incredibly huge romance that I'm going to read about now.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a way.
That's what he was thinking too. He couldn't get it off the ground, so he had to start making stuff up.
Yeah.
I actually even sort of toyed with the reading of this where he has never even thought of the beast of the jungle before that moment when he talks to her, and it's her suggestion that spurs the whole thing on. Just because it's such a human faculty, that you think you're special, you think you're significant and better than other people, that as soon as someone suggests it, you just latch right onto it.
Yeah, because when they first meet, he thinks that, oh, damn, what did I do? I must have, complimented her or propositioned her or something. Damn it, this is going to be embarrassing. It reminded me of a friend I once had that, he always got drunk and the next day would just go around apologizing to everyone. He didn't...
I think it's probably better to start the evening. I'd like to apologize now for what I'm about to do.
That's great. Well, there's something about, we haven't mentioned this, but his name too, right? John Marcher.
Yeah.
It's pretty loaded, I think. I mean, because that's what he's doing through this whole story. He's just, deliberately, is it deliberately? I don't know. He's marching straight ahead towards his doom, single-mindedly with blinders on. And the whole question then is is he being caused to march, or is he, on a path he can't stray from, or is it all the same thing?
You ought to write a parody and call him Prancer.
Yeah, where he stays behind with every woman. Yeah. I think that's on. He's just an extreme lover. He goes around and hanging out at Weather End all the time, picking up girls left and right. Has a hot cadre of women, that he cruises around with.
Props himself in front of one of the paintings and gives his dissertation.
Oh yeah, with a pipe and a glass of brandy. None of these that he prepares for himself. These are handed to him by beautiful women, lit and full.
Yeah. He's lingering behind in every room,
telling you about the history. This actually, my father.
Oh God!
Brilliant.
Well,
hanging out at Weather End.
Is there anything else that we haven't really addressed? Like John Marcher, that's good. Yeah, it does stand out.
I don't know. It's a good one. I'm glad Mary pulled it out of her hat because I immediately remembered wanting to read this before from that course, and it's great. And we can't forget to get back to that, but I really recommend, if anybody's interested in modern literature, I've said this before, but that course is it's awesome.
Yeah, I listened to it on the way to the border yesterday.
Nice.
That's a good time.
Yeah.
The other book that interests me in there was that Evelyn Waugh book he described.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. It's interesting because I thought that I had read everything that Evelyn Waugh had written, and I hadn't read that, and I meant to read it. So thank you for reminding me.
There's a passage that I liked here. He was talking about after he was traveling. He said he stayed away for a year, visited the depths of Asia, spending himself on scenes of romantic interest, of superlative sanctity. But what was present to him everywhere was that for a man who had known what he had known, the world was vulgar and vain. And this is, I think, a contrast between the meaning that he has with someone else who holds his secret, and the kind of bond that created for him, and saved him in a little place against the world that now he just wanders around and it just seems awful.
Right. And it's the shades of that Joni Mitchell song. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
How's she doing? Is she okay?
I think she's still in the hospital. I think that she's,
Are we doing favorite lines?
Sure. You start, Cesare. Please.
Oh, me?
What, did you have one?
Me?
All right. I had one on page 19, or I guess it makes no sense because I just printed mine off. But since it was in time that he was to have met his fate, so it was in time that his fate was to have acted.
No!
And
That's my line!
well,
It's a short story, so there's a great there's great probability.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cesare.
Cesare, please start over
Start over since I ruined this for you.
How about you both say it together? That won't be confusing at all.
Okay.
on 3.
No.
Okay. Since it was in time that he was to have met his fate, so it was in time that his fate was to have acted. And as he waked up to the sense of no longer being young, which was exactly the sense of being stale, just as that, in turn, was the sense of being weak, he waked up to another matter beside. It all hung together. They were subject, he and the great vagueness, to an equal and indivisible law, when the possibilities themselves had accordingly turned stale, when the secret of the gods had grown faint, had perhaps even quite evaporated, that, and that only, was failure. It wouldn't have been a failure to be bankrupt, dishonored, pillared, hanged. It was a failure not to be anything. The only thing that I didn't quite get in that is, what indivisible law do you think he's talking about in that sentence? It all hung together. They were subject, he and the great vagueness, to an equal and indivisible law.
That you got to live your life, no matter what. You can be the great Magnus, you can be the guy who doesn't live.
It's take that risk, Cesare.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
That's not what I want to hear.
Stay in the Shire.
Yeah, right.
How about you, Daniel? Did you have a favorite?
Well, I liked a lot of them. I liked this one. Above all, she was in the secret of the difference between the forms he went through, those of his little office in the government, those of caring for his modest patrimony, for his library, for his garden in the country, for the people in London whose invitations he accepted and repaid, and the detachment that reigned beneath them and made all behavior, all that could in the least be called behavior, a long act of dissimulation. Yeah, I like it. He's a very complex thinker, It would be one thing if this was all purple prose that never went anywhere, and he never was. You could never cash in all this flowery syntax for any revelation or any reasoning. But that's not him. He does. He's got some real insights, and there's a payoff to.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the way that you come to the end of a crazy long sentence, and I had to really tell my editor to shut up like the whole time that I was reading this. I just kept saying shut up, shut up. But you'd get to the end of it, and then you'd actually have to put yourself in reverse and go back through and say, here's the end of the thought. This is what I was going for from the beginning, and then read back through to actually understand it. I maybe because it was short, I thought that if this were a 300-page novel, maybe it would be a problem. But I actually enjoyed it. I was like, oh, this is like, it was like taking some weird maze, to get somewhere but it was all enjoyable. I mean, the writing is superb.
Yeah.
The language is superb.
Yes. Some of it really hit its mark.
Yeah, it's funny, I appreciate, the style of like a Hemingway or something like that, these short declarative sentences. And I appreciate plain language that communicates, that has the virtue of communicating with everybody. But also sometimes, I go to a book to read, a masterwork. I go to something to see somebody put down something that I can't do and to take me into another world. And,
Yeah, and to really play someone who's a language master or a poetic language master. There's a lot to it. Oh, I mean, I think that, a lot of people think that English isn't a beautiful language, and even if it isn't beautiful, you can certainly do beautiful things with it.
I thought he was English the first time I read it.
Kind of the time he lived, they were still pretty much stuck in that.
That makes sense.
Didn't the guy in that course, he mentioned at one point that his students were often disappointed when they realized that, the Tales of the Wild West were they were contemporary with Henry James.
Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
It sort of shatters that illusion.
Was that your only favorite line, Laura, or did you have another one?
Did I say a line?
No, you said that Cesare's was yours.
Oh, no, I do have another one. It's a short line, and I think May says it. And remember in that email I wrote that I feel like our favorite line should reflect the soul of the book. Of course, it can reflect anything, whatever you want. I'm totally open
it should
to anything.
reflect your soul.
Yeah, my soul. Exactly. Considering this is a book of a narcissist, okay, fine. Anyway. So the line I have is, May says it, and it's short, and she says, "I'm not sure you understood. You've nothing to wait for more. It has come."
Yeah, there was a lot of impact with that one.
Yeah, and I think that reflects the book to me.
What? Just tell me what? What's come? What? I don't. Okay, all right. I don't see anything. I would have. Okay, anyway. Please.
And I think I've said that to many men myself.
Yeah. Okay. Seriously, I can't forget to give you all the names of my exes. I really need a committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please send us an email.
Well.
Yeah.
Nathan, did you want to go, or do you want me to go?
Oh yeah, no, please. I just wanted to also to throw it back to Daniel. If you had like another one you were just sitting on, I don't think you have to limit yourself to just one.
No, I'm good. Yeah, you guys go.
All right.
Okay.
He's good.
I think we talked about this one a little bit, but didn't actually get the whole line out with this one. The great rooms caused so much poetry and history to press upon him that he needed some straying apart to feel in a proper relation with them, though his impulse was not, as happened, like the gloating of some of his companions, to be compared to the movements of a dog sniffing a cupboard.
I wish we'd read that one
Nice.
earlier. I think that one actually does sum up a lot of the novel in spirit.
Nice.
I have a one that's just like a little snippet, and then I have two basically. But here, this is what May says to John after they've been talking about all of the beast in the jungle. Did we ever dream with all of our dreams that we would sit and talk of it thus? And that's all.
That's so pretty.
It's so, and it's so innocent, and like, you know what, you're talking about it, you're killing it. Like now looking back, it just crushes my heart. But there was one more. This is on location 631. I found out how to look at that. Okay. He stood for an hour, powerless to turn away and yet powerless to penetrate the darkness of death, fixing with his eyes her inscribed name and date, beating, and I hit the back button. This is why it stinks.
Wow, I don't remember that one.
Yeah, it was prescient.
I hit the back button.
He says, fixing with his eyes her inscribed name and date, beating his forehead against the fact of the secret they kept, drawing his breath while he waited as if some sense would in pity of him rise from the stones. He kneeled on the stones, however, in vain. They kept what they concealed, and if the face of the tomb did become a face for him, it was because her two names became a pair of eyes that didn't know him. He gave them a last long look, but no palest light broke.
Yeah. I like that you can compare it to the line, which I don't have right in front of me, in the beginning when he's talking about her eyes coming through the mask. And now, it's seeing her eyes in the tombstone.
Mm.
That other one, the first one you mentioned too, I thought was great because I think she's telling him right there what it is, isn't she?
Yeah. Well, and also, like, if you maybe could have just seized it yourself instead of waiting for it to be seen somehow. I don't know. It's a heartbreaker.
It's sadder the more you think of it.
Well, he has to get it. He has to get it himself, but he doesn't.
I do think, though, that it's a different thing when you actually say no to something and if there's something that you just kind of missed, right? But saying no to things is I think, saying no to love.
One's doom, however, was never baffled, and on the day she told him his own... am I stealing something else?
I'm totally looking at that line right now.
Okay, you go ahead, Laura. You go ahead, Laura.
No, that's okay. That's all right. You started it, Cesare. Go ahead, but still.
Now I just feel bad.
There's something going on here with you and me, Cesare.
That's it. You guys are bound.
I know.
Mental
God, I can't believe I was reading. All right, you want me to say it?
Yes.
One's doom, however, was never baffled, and on the day she told him his own had come down, she had seen him but stupidly stare at the escape she offered him. The escape she offered him?
He said no.
Yeah. Oh, God. All right.
Well, I wonder if y'all are reading anything else that, maybe intersects with this in tone or just completely different, but just by the way.
Man, I feel like what I'm reading couldn't be more different. I'm reading Burr by Gore Vidal.
Oh, wow. There's a Memphis filmmaker who just made a great documentary about him.
I watched a great documentary about him and realized that, I had read some of his political writing, but I had never read any of his fiction. And God, what an incredible character he was. But reading this, it's interesting because it's not, there's nothing very pretty about it. I'm not madly in love with it, even though I see how great it is. It's kind of weird. But I will press on.
Yeah, I haven't read any of his fiction, but from what I've heard, it's like it's not really aging as well as his essays, people just don't seem to be as in love with it. I don't know.
Interesting. Imagination. He had a hell of an imagination.
God, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. I realized recently that I love liars. That lying, that what takes more imagination than lying. I love the liars of the world. Tell me great stories.
That documentary is called Best of Enemies. It's about his
right.
debate with Buckley.
God. There's some of that stuff
right. I want to see
with
that.
he and Buckley in this documentary that I saw on Netflix. It's painful. It's so uncomfortable to watch. It's painful to watch, but it's so good. I don't know if I could sit through an entire documentary about it.
Oh, it's nice to watch people who can be that eloquent off the cuff.
Yeah, but also just really, it's violent,
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of violence in it. It's interesting.
You mean in the tone of the conversation? I'm not sure what the...
Yeah. They're both were... there's vitriolic.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, in the war of wit, he brought a gun to the knife fight.
It's frightening.
Yeah. He got his victory, but I think it was kind of a Pyrrhic victory. If you look at the tone of where, televised political debate has gone from there, I think it's clear that it went in that direction and it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No one else reading anything?
Actually, no. I've been watching a lot of television. Well, it's not germane, but The Unit is very good. It's written by David Mamet, and I've been watching the seasons of it.
Wait, which one?
It's called The Unit. It's no longer on television, but it did come on CBS, I think, for a while. Anyway, I'm just watching it and streaming anyway. But it's really good. It deals a lot with the family and people of like elite military stuff. And they did one episode about the morality of their jobs, and I expected it to be like, just imagine like whatever kind of pat thing that you think they do to like handle it, like, well, it's for America, whatever. They don't. It's disturbing, and it works, and it's great, and things just keep going. Yeah.
Can you find it? Where can you find that? It's on Netflix?
Sure. It's on Amazon. It's probably other things, but it's called The Unit, and yeah, I didn't. I was looking for something that would engage me, because I'm very interested in also like the kinds of missions that they do, going back to our earlier conversation. Like, I mean, just what's going on in the world, there's a scale to it. And so to see someone looking at, global missions and the interactions of politics and power and, things are very interesting to me right now, because I'm trying to see what's going on. But it's fiction, so whatever.
Huh, interesting. I'll take a look.
I love David Mamet. I love a lot of his plays.
I saw American Buffalo when it came out 100 years ago with who's that actor who played it? Oh God, who's that actor?
Is it Sam Shepard?
The actor. Oh, the one that does the shows.
guy.
Oh, in the movies. He does the movies.
No.
Was it Sam Shepard?
No, it was Sam Shepard. It wasn't. It was. He always plays a gangster.
Oh.
And he was married to that woman.
Okay, we're gonna figure this out. Ray Liotta, Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro.
Yeah, no. You think of Robert De Niro and
Pacino?
He was a
Al
biped.
Pacino.
Okay.
Al Pacino.
Oh, right. Now I get it.
I saw him do American Buffalo when it came out 100 years ago.
Nice.
That was wild. That was wild. Very wild experience, because it was in a theater that was off Broadway here in New York, and the theater was very small. So you were right there, and Pacino was right there. I mean, it was like he was in your living room. It's really cool.
Wow.
It was really fun to watch that.
I'm going to be up there Thursday. We're going to see something. I don't know what.
You are?
Yeah.
Well, Jesus, give me a call.
Okay, great.
But don't worry about it. Don't feel pressure. It's okay. Everything's cool.
Well, if I have time, I'd love to. I don't know if we will. But...
Don't worry about it. But are you going to a show or something?
Yeah, they always give her tickets, but I actually kind of hate musical theater, and I'm pretty sure that's what we're doing. So.
What musical theater? You don't know?
I don't know. Whatever they give her tickets to is what we'll do.
All right.
But it will be cool just to see a show.
It's too bad you can't get to Boston, man. Nick Offerman is doing Confederacy of Dunces in Boston.
Oh, wow.
That I would really love to see. I'm hoping that it goes well and that they travel with it, because I would see that.
They probably will. I think I've heard good, stuff about it, so they probably will.
I didn't even realize it had been adapted.
I think it's been tried a bazillion times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cesare, do you have something you're reading?
I'm reading Logic Comics, The Epic Search for Truth, which is a graphic novel about Bertrand Russell.
Nice.
I've seen that.
Wow, I haven't even heard of that.
It's kind of it. I'm interested in the philosophy, and I can't, for the life of me, even get close to reading any, analytic stuff. So it's a nice intermediate. And I finished that book. What's it called? That's right here.
That book. That book that was with that actor.
That has pages.
With the pages, yeah. The World Beyond Your Head.
Right.
Yeah. What was your final verdict?
Yeah, I'm still compiling my notes, and I did like it. I thought he was a little heavy-handed on Kant, and also just depresses me, because he's talking about these cool careers people have, and I'm like, well, that's great. I have still have a shitty career.
No.
I know, right?
He's like, people that are, situated in the world and working with their hands and making an impact, one of those things. I also have an idea of myself as a handyman, but I've never actually done anything. So, so that kind of confirmed my ideas of.
Yeah, I have an idea of myself as an artist, but all I do is
Yeah, I'm a superhero in another life.
Ant-Man.
I just finished reading The Inferno again for school.
Wowie.
Wow.
Actually, I'm kind of a fan of the more I've read it enough times now that I'm sort of a fan. But I got to write a cool paper on it, which was kind of exciting because I did the bit where Ugolino is eating Ruggeri's head at the end of the Inferno, and he's just eternally eating his head. And I got to close with that Nietzsche quote: "What we object to in Christianity is taste, not logic."
Are you saying that eating head is not delicious?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of taste.
Yes, that's it.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.